Tell them I am a Chehalis tribal member and carry the name Tuni Moose. Tell them I am from a family of 14 and one of the middle children of Hazel Pete, Chehalis Nisqually, and Joseph Dupuy, Sac and Fox, Potawatomi. Tell them I grew up without electricity, running water, and no paved road into the Chehalis Reservation, but we were rich with salmon, deer, berries, camas, and water from a well that provided for the whole reservation. Tell them I had a mom who was instrumental in us knowing all the families on the res, and we attended general council meetings where the language was still spoken. At the time, there were 10 fluent speakers. We knew the families who raced horses on the prairie, witnessed some of the last overland canoe races, fished with our grandpa, Frank Pete, on the Black and Chehalis River, selling our catch to Indian fish buyers, and from a distance watched the huge gatherings for Salhal during our annual Chehalis Tribal Days. Tell them I attended the Little White Church, the Shaker Church, and traveled to Skokomish for Siowan, the traditional religion. We went to a school that was white, and outside of the school day participated in a full spectrum of changing cultural times for the Chehalis tribe. Because a county line divides the res, my brothers, sisters, and I attended a school as the only Indians, one Dupuy in each classroom. At the time, 50s, 60s, 70s, the Chehalis did not have money. We experienced poverty, social economic deprivation, and the consequences of limited resources. We held bingo night, craft sales, raffles, and wrote grants to sponsor cultural family events on the res. Mom, besides serving on the Chehalis Business Committee, was elected to the local PTA and traveled to Spokane for a state meeting. The people, to pay her way, raised cash. Tell them I am from a people who are resourceful, hardworking, who have an ability to find humor in daily events, and who have the ability to reframe situations, are optimistic, show a willingness to help others, have faith, spirituality, provide social supports, and as a people have an ability to face fear and the unknown. Tell them Hazel Pete Stastable had a 5-generation photograph we would look at as kids. She was 5 years old, and in the photo, our people were holding baskets showing the wealth of how they provided for the family. The oldest was a hard coil basket weaver, providing a basket used for cooking and mountain berry picking. She'd stayed home and gathered supplies and was a weaver. The next 2 generations of women were barters, traders, and traveled over a 2-year period from the hump tulips to the Columbia River, bartering, trading baskets, basket materials, traditional dyes, and food, medicine. They purchased the first Singer sewing machine in the county and made clothes to trade for hay and places to stay with their horses and buggy. They were trilingual, and over the years, each had several husbands, linking our family to many other tribes in the area. Harriet Bob Pete, my grandmother, Kaya, was famous for coil baskets and many designs. She was the one who watched the property while the women traveled. Hazel Pete grew up hearing the language, knowing the traditional ways, walking to the few homes on the reservation. I'm a 6th-generation weaver. My daughters are 7th-generation weavers, and I have grandchildren who are weavers. And now I am matzah to my first great-great-granddaughter, a weaver. 9 generations of weavers since the signing of the Stevens Treaties. Tell them Hazel Pete Stastable was influential because she occasionally told all the kids a teaching. When we were young and our way out the door, she would proclaim to us at different times. When I was 21, I was through school working and putting my brother through college. She also said, "Your Uncle Oscar was 12 when he said, 'Today I am a man.'" She also said, "Basketry is a sit-beside art, and you'll need to sit with me today." I learned education was important, cultural and formal. I knew women were highly capable and would get an education, a job, and then work to get others through college. Young people were to decide when to begin to make a difference. The individual decides. Today, I am a grown-up. And you can't simply leave. You have to take time to learn through sitting beside, to learn the arts, language, medicine, stories, songs, dances, and the protocol of our people. Tell them at the Resmart Tribal gas station, a young tribal member was home from college, trying to decide to go back to school or not. And my mentor, Ramona Bennett Puyallup, was there to proclaim, "I'm so proud of you." It was my daughter feeling the need to stay home, to keep sitting beside the old ones, to keep learning. I learned from Ramona Bennett during my first teaching job, sometimes as tribal people, we're simply there to give hugs. It's a physical affirmation. And hug my daughter she did. No words, but they know that tribal kids can be both. Be strong culturally and be educated. That year, I had an opportunity to hear Ramona Bennett address a group of educators concerned about infusing their curriculum with some cultural relevance. As she was winding up her talk, she took the time to reminisce about the significance of the takeover of the BIA federal building in Washington, D.C. during the early 70s. She said, "There was a point in the negotiations when we knew it was time to prepare, and elders modeled for us how to put on scalp and face paint, feathers, get out the drum, pray, sing, prepare to die so the unborn can live, not just survive, live." The ritual of this oral tradition in which the non-Indian educators were participating reminded me of my own family's discussions. Clearly, there is a need for my generation to now give voice to our experiences with cultural encounters and teachings. Oral tradition honors children as the vital link with the past and the future. Extended families recognize words, actions as forces that can be acted upon by the next generation. Tell them I know our ancestors lived in tumultuous time, and in the midst of that, took time to think about us, to try to provide for us the things we need to continue as Indians and to identify as Indians: land, political, social, spiritual rights, rituals and symbols of culture, language, and memory of our rightful relationships to nature and to each other. Ours are the faces that our ancestors would never see, the names they would never pronounce, laughter they would never hear, tragedy they would never experience. Tell them I model hard work, perseverance, and a steadfast commitment to reclaiming cultural art traditions. I'm the middle daughter of 14, so my youngest sister and I were the ones who got up at 4:30 a.m. with my dad, and then we kept the fire going when he left for the logging camp. We haven't been able to break that training. We're the early risers and get things ready for the day or the trip to gather basket supplies from spring into the early fall. Cedar, cattail, sweetgrass, tule, beargrass, nettle. We have drying and processing stations set up on the property, the original allotment on the Chehalis Reservation, 1879, and work with all the kids to get basket materials ready for weaving and for storing during the winter months. I persevere through all the times people, teachers, agencies, and government officials have said no. I persevere through times when laws and policies were meant to hold the Chehalis tribe back. I persevere through the illogic of public schools to assimilate tribal people into white people. Today, my daughters, grandchildren, and great-grandchild live in rapidly changing times. My husband and I voice concern and model for them that they have the obligation to provide for each other and for the needs of future generations. They have the significant responsibility to make plans, give voice to the vision, and provide the political, spiritual, social groundwork for the 7th generations from now. Tell them I know this because we talk about it. They know within their lifetime their action and stand is important. Tell them I am honored to be a weaver and part of the Tears of Duk'Wibahl. Aho. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko tīna werihana hau ngō Ngāti Maniapoto Ngāti Pikiao, Ngāti Raukaua Ngāti Whawhākea. I noho ana I nai nei ki Wainganui a Ngāti Pikiao, no Rotuati. I am Tina Werihana. I live in a little community of Rotuati, which is just south of Rotorua. And I'm just making reference to where I come from and my tribal people. Come on, you two.
Mā tātua te waka, putawa ki te maunga, ko ohine mataroa te awa, ko Ngāti Puke ko te iwi, ko te pāhau te marae, ko Glenda Hape ahau. My name is Glenda Hape. I am from a beautiful little township called Whakatane where the sun shines all the time. I'm a mother of 5 and this is my baby Sunny. I have a beautiful husband who allows me to come to these gatherings and it's a pleasure to be here. And of course I'm a weaver.
Kia ora, my name is Sunny. This is my mother and I'm a child of 5, so I'm the youngest of the family with 4 older brothers. I'm from Puropuro through my mother's side, Ngāti Pukeko. On my father's side, Ngāti Hoi me Ngāti Parau. I came along with my mum. I was very lucky to come along. I have more of an ecology background, but slowly learning weaving.
Kia ora tātou, ko Takitumu te waka, ko Wairo te awa, ko Ngāti Ranginui te iwi, Ngāti Kahu te hapu, ko Melita Bennett ahau, I noho ana au ki Rotorua. So my name is Melita Bennett. I live in a little area in New Zealand, Rotorua, where all the mud pool and the thermal activities are. Kia ora koutou.
The purpose of coming together as a group and having a conversation as opposed to one person doing all the talking, it'll give an opportunity for individual perspectives of what Yvonne was wanting us to share with the gathering. But first and foremost, it's actually really good to be back here at Evergreen State College and to reconnect with our friends from the first gathering here in 2001 and how the gatherings have reciprocated in coming back to Aotearoa. And we've gone more beyond just friends, we're family, and it's good to see the generations of coming through. Usually when I travel, I have my mum with me too, so it's lovely to see mum and daughter in the midst, and also we're mentoring a daughter of a weaver from our perspective. But it also gives the weavers an opportunity to look at other areas to consider beyond just weaving materials. And it also makes us reflect on where did we get the art? How did we acquire the skill? And I'll just give some reflection on how I acquired the expertise and the knowledge and my learning process. I was just a little about 11 or 12, and how I learned was more through observation through my mum weaving, but also the community. So mum and the community are responsible for what I know. I don't claim to owning what I know. I have a responsibility to my people, and I'm merely the guardian, I'm merely the kaitiaki of what I have. And the idea of having acquired the knowledge is I have a responsibility to share it with people, and sharing it with people with the understanding that they're going to share it. So it becomes a rippling effect rather than get to a point where the learning is going to stop. Because that's my purpose in life, is to share. But also to keep in mind where the stability in the learning process had come from, and that was being anchored from my home, from my family. So I'm from a family of 5, and I'm the second eldest, and I have one brother who follows me. And we were brought up on a farm, and it was interesting to listen to one of the previous speakers and say they had no power and access to water as easy as other areas on the reservation. And we were that community, we were that family in Rotorua. We were the last family in Rotorua to ever have the power. And when we were growing up as children, my mum did all the hand washing. We'd go down to the creek to wash all our clothes and milk a cow, because we didn't have transport to go to the shop, because we thought we lived so far in a remote part of the world because we didn't have power. And so it's quite lovely to have this opportunity to share, and also to know that we can imbue a lot of those stories into what we weave, and to maintain the histories through the symbols that you incorporate into your weaving, and also acknowledging the origins of that pattern, as opposed to claiming that you actually own that pattern, because in fact you don't own any pattern, because research says from our people's perspective that they already did it. And also the thinking of some of our weavers is self-taught. Well, you're not self-taught. You probably looked at a picture in a book and inspired by that, or the book was your informant. And it's about how you want to accrue the information and incubate it in your mind until there's a point in your time that you want to, and it's ready to come out. And there's many a times when that happens with me over a period of time. And also within the weaving is the responsibility to your community and your iwi, which is the bigger tribal groups. And so for me, within the prompt it says, tell them I. And so I'm saying that I'll tell you I means iwi to me. Iwi is people and not I as individual. And that is a strong line for all of us. And also from a cultural perspective, the basis that informs your knowledge and your what you create is taking your people with you and not leaving your people behind. Inform them about what you're doing, even if they don't come. It might take them a few days or a few weeks to actually register what you've been communicating, but to inform them about what you're doing rather than not, and also about the responsibilities that you have to the retention of the art form, particularly within the weaving. And the retention is exactly the example here that we have, and in terms of the mentoring process. And then it's what happens once we go back home from the gathering and how effective it will be. And we know it'll be effective because this is why myself, Glenda, Sunny and Melita are here because we're going to be the communicators, which is a message that I picked up yesterday in terms of the witnesses and the role of the witness and the responsibility the witness has to the gathering. And I think the concept of that is just wonderful, but informing everybody that that's who they are, because at home we don't have witnesses as such. People will just be noted as that person, and also about the eagle and the raven, or the eagle and the crow, and if people from those clans are within the space, they automatically know who the messenger is, whereas we are more inclined to be informed. Okay, you can be the spokesperson, or you can be the one that's going to be to organise an event or something. And that takes a lot of responsibility. But also, before the conversation is shared, in the capacity of our Māori Weavers organisation, I sit here as the chairperson of that organisation, and sometimes there's an expectation, because you're the chairperson, that you have all these responsibilities, and weavers have an expectation that you have to do all of these things and communicate everything that you do. But I'd like to remind people that it's only an organisation, and I have other responsibilities to my family, to my people around my marae, and also to my iwi. And once upon a time it was to the tertiary institution where I lectured, and then the organisation. It's not that the organisation comes first, it's my people that come first. And with us here at the gathering, it's for the weavers to understand in what capacity are we here to represent. Are we here as representing our iwi, our people? Are we here as members of the national organisation? But that's for us to know, and for the weavers back home to inquire and respect the roles and the responsibilities of what we're doing. Yeah, so, and this will lead the conversation into what's going to take place. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so.
Okay. What does our culture mean to me? Well, it's what we do, it's what we feel, what we think, you know. And our food we create, our songs, kapahaka, our visual arts, you know, that's what my culture means to me, and my language. And our water, you know, that's in every aspect of life. You know, that's what our plants live on, what we live on. You know, without water, we can't create the mahi we do. You know, for our materials, our weaving. You know, our water is, to Māori, is taonga. You know, it's our blessing, you know, it's our medicine. We just can't do without it. Just getting back to Tina, what she was saying, where she studied. I studied at Te Whare Wananga, Te Whare... Te Whare Wananga Wawanuiarangi, and Tina was my tutor, and an awesome one at that. You know, she's my mentor, and now she's just a great friend. And coming here, it's just amazing. You know, at the moment I'm doing a pake, which is a rain cape, and no doubt I'll leave it here for the people. And it's just great to enjoy everyone else's company, their creative works and doing some of their mahi while we're here.
I wasn't really exposed to raranga or weaving when I was younger, but it was more when my mum started learning from Tina. I think that was in about 2010, was it? Yeah, and it was cool just going into the into Awanui and helping with exhibitions and seeing how all the works were created and how the what was I saying? And how the shows were curated. I think in my age group, we're not really going off our own tikanga with art. I think we're doing things more contemporary. But I do believe there is a bit of a resurgence in the old ways of how we did do art. Like Mum was saying, our kapaka is very strong in our country. Raranga, I have seen a few more younger ones get into it or who have wanted to talk about it more. Morako, our reo, there's a lot of classes, and I think the younger generation do feel a lack of learning that, so we're trying to learn more as much as we can from our elders, from going to classes, everyday living, speaking it more in our homes.
I was taught how to weave back in 1993 when my boys were at Kohanga Reo, and I was lucky enough to have been taught by one of Tina's students back in the time, Angeline Thompson, and she pretty much showed me everything that Tina had taught her. So I always like to let people know that, and so that's where my journey began. So over the years, I went to lots of different things, different wānanga, followed the weavers around everywhere I could go, stuff like that. My nanny, she was actually a weaver as well. Unfortunately, she died when I was 3 years old, but I've heard beautiful stories about her weaving and how she used to be out in the flax bush and stuff a lot. In the past 8 years, I've been teaching for Te Wānanga o Aotearoa back in New Zealand, so I have students of my own, and we run what we call a noho marae delivery program, where we take our students away for 1 weekend a month, and we stay at a marae with them from Friday 6 o'clock until Sunday lunchtime. So we have them for the whole weekend. So one of the things for me and what I try and what I teach and how I try and instill it into them is keeping our customs and traditions going from that have been handed down, like the generational thing that Yvonne was talking about earlier. So trying to instill that into them and maintain those throughout what I do and how I do it and how I teach them. So that's been quite a big thing. And also been lucky enough over the last, since I've been at the wānanga, to have been nurtured along by some really awesome people. So they've helped me come a long way in my journey with this teaching. Being able to come here is totally amazing, but also to be able to learn skills of the Indigenous people here and take it back to my students, take it back to New Zealand, and show them everything, what I've learned and what's going on here with the Indigenous people as well.
One of the things I'd like to pick up also is about the cultural practices associated to the materials that we use. And within mainstream, there's an expectation, according to what's been delivered to programs, is about delivering it to their timelines and their deadlines. And one of the things that I've always been mindful of, that it actually doesn't fit our cultural practices in terms of cultural harvesting and the appropriateness of the timing. And it totally contradicts our practice. And it was one thing that I wouldn't do. I said, no, you can't do that because the plants aren't ready, the bark's not ready to produce the dye that you will get from certain trees. And so it's about believing in what our people had stood by for many years rather than compromise the practice of our people. And I think it's very empowering for us in this position to actually continue that and to retain the humility that is bestowed on us. We're at wherever we go because we're all of those things. We're the cultural, we're the conservators, we know how to gather, we know what is appropriate, what's not, we know the prayers associated to, we know where to deposit all the remnants of what's not going to be used for weaving and what happens to all of those pieces. So it's the collectiveness of material source is integral, and the result of that is the woven form. And for us, this winding down is our people will look at the inside or the underside of something to determine how good that weaver is, as opposed to be overwhelmed by what you see. Because from in the inside and the way it's finished, it reflects the teachings and it reflects the genealogy of where that weaver came from, and which is what was being alluded to earlier. And I think those are really important. And those are reminders. And where the cultural context comes in, our non-Māori weavers, they don't have that because they don't have the cultural base. They have their own culture of practice, but we have the wider the spirit the moment that we're conceived. And it's that wider that we have with the works that we create. And you can't give that to a non-Māori person. No matter how hard they try to be that, they will never be that. But in saying that, you have some very, very, very good non-Māori weavers who are very, very respectful. And on the flip side, you'll have some that are totally opposite. And so in the meantime, we can have that dialogue. But at the end of the day, the art is of our people. And so having the opportunity to be here and in the Longhouse and with friends, it's just a wonderful opportunity to be able to share some of our culture with everybody. So that's just winding down, and we're going to now we're going to sing a song for you for listening to us. E hara I te mea no nai nei, te aroha nona, tupuna I tuku iho, I tuku iho. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
My name is Miles Miller, and I'm a beadwork artist, and I'm very happy to be able to participate in this Indigenous gathering of artists. One of the things that is important to me as far as being a beadwork artist is retaining the different designs that our people use as far as beadwork is concerned. I really like to try to keep my work traditional, but with a contemporary twist to it. I do different things with my beadwork instead of just the typical traditional stuff. Like I'm working on a dress top today, or currently. It's going to be for my Aunt Peggy. And what I did different with that is our traditional dresses used to have a deer tail right in the front. And then there would be some lines going out to the sleeve. And instead of the deer tail on this dress, I have a shell, a really nice shell, kind of silver black color. And I'm using that to represent the deer tail of this dress. And I also put abalone shells across for to show the lines of the dress that the people used to follow when we would decorate the dresses. So it's going to be a different thing for her to wear, and I really hope she'll like it. She hasn't seen it yet. I've learned she's very patient. She ordered the dress a year ago. So I know that's part of the reason I do beadwork, to make my family happy. But I also do it, like I said, because the culture needs to be retained. In the last few years, I've witnessed at home, a lot of our people are not going to the longhouse as they should. They're taking shortcuts with a lot of the beliefs that I grew up with. And I firmly believe these traditional teachings, especially for the families who are in mourning. I've seen many, many times these families bringing themselves back out within the 24 hours after the funeral. My grandfather, my mother, and my Aunt Rose, they taught us, and we live by that when we're in mourning, we have to step out of things, of our traditional practices for a year. And that there are certain things we cannot do. We can't go out onto the land to gather our food. We can't go to the mountains to hunt. We can't go to the river to fish. And so we live by that. We follow those very strictly, as Grandpa told us. And I try to remind people that that's how they are supposed to live. Those unwritten laws for our people are very, very important to remember. And I don't know, I think my words fall on deaf ears when I talk to the people about it. But I hope one day that they'll listen, they'll hear the words, and that they'll come back to living this way of life again. Some of the things I've seen as far as these shortcuts being taken is our food. Some of it has very short growing period. Last year, we were lucky to have maybe a week or two where we could go to the mountains and pick our huckleberries. The year before that, the growing season was really bad. I don't think the berries even got ripe last year. And the people just don't realize that, what they're doing when they do break these laws. But, one day I do hope they come back to that. The designs also are important to the people. My mother used to have 12 different beaded buckskin dresses. And in that design, the designs of each of these dresses would be different, but there would be one specific design that people would see and they would know she comes from the Pinkham family. They would know she's Yakima by seeing that dress, that design that her grandmother put into that design work on her dresses. So knowing being able to have the people recognize you just from seeing one little design, They would know who you are, where you come from. And I hope that the people, when they make those and wear those things, that they'll always remember that. The things I make, I try to match my designs for the person that's going to get it. Like the dress I'm working on for my Aunt Peggy, she's a very quiet person, very beautiful in the words she speaks with us. And so that's part of the reason why I chose to use that abalone. The quiet beauty that's within the colors of that shell are just magnificent. And that's one of the first things I thought of when my Aunt Peggy asked me to make this dress, is that I have to use abalone for her. And so that's the reason I'm doing that. Just because, to me, that's what represents my aunt. And I'm going to be using mother of pearl shells also on that dress. So I hope she'll really love it.
My name is Evelyn Vanderhoop. I'm a Haida weaver, and I'm just thrilled to be back here. I was here in 2001, and it's great to see all of these new people, as well as the people that were here 16 years ago. One of the things that they wanted us to talk about was culture with this interview, and I think that's so important because we come from our place, and our place created our culture. And my mother is from Haida Gwaii, and I now live in Haida Gwaii. And every morning I hear the eagles, and that's what I am. My mother is eagle, and we are a matrilineal family people, and I'm eagle, and I'm able to wake up in Haida Gwaii and hear the eagles. I live near the water, and every morning I get to see the tide come in, and every afternoon I get to see the tide go out. And I see patterns in the water, and they really look a lot like the kind of weaving that I do. I do the raven's tail, which is a geometric patterned weaving, and then I also do the nahin. And the nahin has a technique. I recently found the technical term was tapestry twining. So in my tapestry twining techniques, I'm able to do the form lines and the ovoids and the U's. And so I'm able, with my weaving that is vertical with the warp and horizontal with the weft, I get to do the curves with this technique. And then I get to draw with my weaving, I draw the eagle. And so my personal culture, my family, my mother really took it upon herself, and my Nani Selena took it upon herself, them, to bring me back to the island. I was born and raised in Ketchikan, Alaska, on the other side of the border. But they always knew it was important for us to go back to the Haida homeland. And so as children, we were brought back. So I was able to get the culture of the islands as well, not just the culture that my mother and my Nani brought to me. We lived very close to my Nani, Selena, and she took us to the beaches when it was time to gather clams, and she took us to the woods when it was time to gather the bark, and she took us to the berry patches, and we picked berries. But it wasn't recreational. None of that was recreational. It was to gather, and it was to be with the earth. And so even though I lived in a pretty good-sized town, I was close to the culture of my Nani Selena, And then they took us back to the island, and I was close to the people. And when I was growing up, I was listening to people earlier being interviewed, and they talked about patterns. And when I was about 12 or 13, I think the first important gift that I can remember that my nanny gave me was a bracelet, and it had the eagle on it. And she said, "You wear this. It's important. Everybody knows who you are, what you are." And that's important because as a teenager, you couldn't date or even be close, really, to someone of your own clan. So it's important to marry the opposite clan. And so there I was, a teenager, and my nanny, that's how she was talking and telling us. And that's how it's passed down, is through gifts, not just physical gifts, but gifts of knowledge. And I just feel really, really appreciative and grateful that I come from this weaving family. My nanny kept the weaving going when everybody else was dropping the weaving because the world was moving fast. And but she continued to weave. And she'd sell them in little trinkets, trinket stores and curio stores, not for very much, but it was her pocket money. And then her work was so good, and people started appreciating her. And so museums started inviting her to go to different exhibits and to demonstrate. And so she got out of the small community and went places, and London and Washington, D.C. And my mother, who worked as an accountant at the local hospital, when she retired, she went with her mother and learned. And so I'm now a mother, and I'm passing this down to my daughters. I have 2 daughters, and both of them know the Naheen technique, and that's the form line chief's robe that I do, is called the Naheen robes. Commonly they're called chilkats, but this is a very time-consuming weaving, and I'm very, very fortunate that both my daughters want to pick that technique up and have learned from me and have learned from my mother, have been inspired by the stories of my nanny. And so we pass this down, and it's the culture that we're passing down, as well as the art, by our stories, by learning the proper protocol in the woods and on the beach. All of these things we weave into our art. And our art, as Indigenous visual artists, I believe we live within a circle of culture, and that you can't just create something. You can't replicate something and say, there it is, and that's what it is, because it's more than the object. It's part of the culture, and it tells a story, and it tells ancestral stories, and it's important for us to reach back and be grounded by our ancestors and be inspired by their knowledge and their great skill. I do a lot of researching in museums, and I pull out these drawers of these big chief's robes, and the energy of the ancestors are there, and they really are. It's not what I'm thinking. That kinetic energy that we thigh spin our warp, and we put that energy into the warp, and the plies twist into S direction, and then we release them, and they zip up on themselves into Z directions. And that's kinetic energy. That's energy that's being held there by our ancestors. And when I reach in and look at these robes in the drawers, it comes up at you. Many times it'll bring you to tears. So I'm just really thrilled that I'm part of the continuation of this important art. And then to come together at this place in the Evergreen Longhouse and be able to go from what you're doing and knowing and just go a few feet and be able to talk and learn from another person who has that same concept, that same circle, that they're not just creating an object for some prize, of an I prize. It's a we prize. It's they represent their cultures, and they're telling their own cultural stories in the things they're creating. And so here in this place, just moving a few yards and seeing what the other people are doing, it's you don't just learn and see their techniques, but in your talking and sharing, you hear their stories, and the stories are important. And I thank you for listening to a little bit of my story. Hawa.
My Haida name is Ilskialas. It means good luck fairy. When I was growing up, they always gave you a child's name, and my child name was Ilskia. It was Kabadisle, and it means little show off. And I think they used that name because I was really shy. I was not a show off. I think it was kind of ironic that they named me that. But I grew up in Haida Gwaii. I grew up in the village of Masset. And in Masset, they still were using outhouses. We used our rain barrel for drinking water, but we used our well water for washing clothes. Water was really an important part of our life in the village. And it was interesting to find out that water was the theme of this group gathering. Because and sometimes, even though we live in a rainforest, we would run out of water, and we would have to use muskeg water. We'd have to go up to the muskeg and get water from they weren't wells, they were just puddles in the muskeg, and we'd have to use that water not just for washing, but for drinking. So when I read about the theme of this, I thought how important water was to us. I remember when the salmon came up the streams, and we went to our rivers to get the salmon, and how the native people, the Haida people, would welcome the salmon as they came up the stream, and how they sang to the salmon for returning to feed the Haida people, and how they were so respectful of the salmon. They would, when they got through harvesting and preparing the salmon, we ate almost everything that was on the salmon. We ate the eggs, they even salted the tips and fins, and we also ate the head. The head was baked. And when everything was left over that we didn't eat, we returned it to the river because we wanted to respect the salmon. We wanted the salmon to come back again to feed our people. So the river, the water, the ocean that gave us our halibut was very important to us. When we dried the halibut, we would hang it on racks outside our cabins, and they would kill 2 crows, because the crows, if we didn't do that, then the crows would try and get to the halibut to eat it. But they would hang the crows up on beside the racks where the halibut was drying. But the crows weren't happy about what we did. They would stomp around on the ground, quarreling at us. And when we finally took the crows down after the fish was hung in the smoking house, in the smokehouse, then the crows would drag the dead crows around to remind us we did something very wrong. And so it was a way that we lived, and how important even the ocean was to the way we lived. And when I started doing basketry was such an important part of our life as a child. They were still using baskets. For instance, when they were digging clams, the small children, 5 and 6 year olds, because we dug these clams commercially, would do the grading. Because if we put them in boxes, we had numbers in our boxes which would go to the cannery. And the children that were 5 and 6 years old actually were the ones that graded, and they took their jobs seriously, that if there was any cracked clam, they put it in another basket where we would be using it at home. And then the children who were 8 and 9 years old, they got the clams from the diggers. They were clam diggers, because the tide, as Evelyn said, the tide goes in and out, and when the tide is out is when you get the clams. And so those older children got the clams from the adults who were digging and brought it to the children who were grading it, because if there was even any sand on any of the clams, the company that paid us for the clams at that time it was 4 cents a pound for the clams that we were digging. But if there was any sand or any crack in the clam, then we would only get 2 cents a pound. So it was really, the children who were grading took their jobs very seriously. They did not play. They continued to work as long as there were clams that were being brought to them. So I really wanted to talk about our early culture, because people are going to forget how we lived. Our berry baskets were very important. And when we went berry picking, we used those spruce root baskets. We were still using those baskets when I was a child. And all the children, everybody went picking berries. And you didn't play, you didn't eat them. You made sure that, because this was going to be part of our food for winter. And so it was a very important part of our culture. But they taught us also to respect the land. When we were picking the berries, we didn't try to pick every berry there was. We picked there were always some that were left, because then they would replenish the supply for the following year. All the things we did culturally, we took it as if for granted. Like, for instance, I didn't speak English till I went to school, and I didn't even know my English name until I went to school. Many of the things that we did were so much a part of our culture. Even the teachers came with us when we went to commercially dig those clams. They would move to Toe Hill with us, and they ate the same food we did. So I really admire those early teachers. But basketry was such an important part of our culture. Everything that we did with the basketry, we harvested the material, and when we went out to harvest the spruce roots for our baskets, the women also really blessed the ground, and they didn't pray, they just thanked the trees for the roots, and the spruce trees also gave us medicine. We used the spruce pitch when somebody had an injury or had a cut. They would use the pitch from the spruce trees to help with the healing of the wounds. So when we went out spruce rooting, the people thought it was such an important part of our culture that children were not allowed to touch the roots. When we went there, they actually had us collecting wood for the fire, because after we collect the spruce roots, the Haida people put it in a fire so that the outer casing of the spruce roots would come off. And so that's what we did. The children were collecting the firewood. And when the women got through collecting, sometimes some women quit earlier, and they would sing a song before they went to the fire, because they were thanking the forest, they were thanking the trees for the roots that we got. So it was really an important part of the basketry tradition. Many of the older women were still weaving, but those people who came from boarding school didn't get that cultural knowledge. And it was really sad to see that basketry almost died out, because these people who were sent off to boarding schools came home and did not learn to do the weaving. But my mother thought it was so important that when she started weaving and teaching weaving, she taught first at the museum in Juneau, then she taught at Ketchikan Community College. And when she was teaching, she didn't discriminate. Of course, the schools, the museums couldn't discriminate, but there were mostly white people taking her class. And my husband, when I used to write letters for my mother, and when I read a letter to my mother about this woman named Ida Benzel, actually from Oregon, had been weaving. And this collector, because I had sent a hat that my mother had woven to this collector in Oregon, he sent me a basket for getting him in touch with my mother. And this basket from Ida Benzel, he said she was 92, and when Ida Benzel, who was a Siletz, when she died, he said the art of Siletz basketry would die. So when my husband heard the letter being read about this basket, he came to me and said, "You have to take a class." And I was a bookkeeper, and I said, "Oh, I don't think the nuns would let me take the time off." But of course they did when they heard my husband told them that he was afraid the Haida basketry would die. But when I went into the classroom, my mother said, "What do you do here?" She spoke broken English. I weave. Look, you go home." Thank goodness the head of the art department came in, and he said, "What's happening?" And I said, "Well, she doesn't want me in the class." He put his arms around my mother and said, "We really need to have so many students, and so we need her registration." So my mother said, "Okay." But I had to take that basket undone, I think probably about 10 times. It was almost shredded when I got through taking that class. But I got addicted to weaving, and it was just, I could not stop weaving. And in fact, my husband would say, sometimes in the middle of the night, he'd say, "Dolores, you have to come to bed." And I'd say, "I'm doing just one more row." And he'd say, "Well, I don't think you should do one more row. You come to bed." So basketry is addictive. And I read in the Boston Globe that this Joe Adavasio, who was an anthropologist who studied basketry, he said that when humans started to do basketry, that basketry was more important than the wheel because it impacted the whole human race. That they could move out of caves because they could make objects to pick berries with. They could make clothing. They could make thatched roofs. They could live in houses. So basketry was a very important part of human history. Thank you.
My name is Hawanet Old Peter. I go by Hala. My tribal name is Hoanitzel, and it means keeper of the traditions.
I'm Halisa Haegal. My Indian name is Patikuma. I'm Nez Perce, Chehalis, and Skokomish. And go ahead.
I guess I should say that I'm Skokomish and Chehalis. Yvonne Peterson is my mother. Hazel Pete was my grandmother, and we grew up with baskets in our lives ever since we were born. All our children grow up playing in basket materials and going on gathering trips. So I think culture is just, the weaving culture is just super important to us because it just is what our family does. Family gatherings usually revolve around a basket, weaving baskets, sorting materials, cleaning materials. My best memories from growing up are all my aunts and my grandmas and my teachers, just all being around a table, cleaning materials, teasing each other, and weaving. And I think that the culture of weaving, because it's such a sit-beside art, is just so important to keeping families together and communities together, because it really is, you have to learn by sitting next to each other. And
It's a social thing.
It's a social thing.
It's really nice because you're all sitting there together. You're learning from each other and improving on your skills and sharing stories. It's just a nice time to be together.
I think that the basketry is also just getting more important to me personally because looking around, I'm seeing a lot of my teachers are no longer here with us anymore, and it's just a very intense feeling to know that I'm going to be that teacher soon. It will be me that has to keep this going, and it will be me that has to teach my nieces and nephews and their kids, and I have to learn as much as I can now because we have to take it forward into the future. So I'm a 7th generation basket weaver since the signing of the treaties in our area, and I want to make sure that this goes 7 generations further from me.
Yeah, I started teaching at a young age. I always, we hold the Weavers Teaching Weavers conference, and I always reminisce about when it started, just at a little tiny building in the Centralia Park, and it was free. Even like you could just come in. We just made these little cedar hearts, and so that was to get, I think, just to prepare us for a future of teaching, becoming master weavers, and it's kind of wild to see how big it's gotten. It's pretty much as big as, it seems as big as Duk'Wibahl now. But yeah, I'm realizing that I now am going to be the one teaching the next generation, and I think it's important to improve on these skills and learn new things because of that reason. And and it's exciting teaching too, because I'm just learning new things from students as well, finding new ways to think about things, new ways to do things, and and also just being social with them, like I was saying before, sharing stories and joking around. Me and Hayla, we're always teasing each other, and it just makes it fun for the students too, because they get to kind of laugh at us as we joke at each other.
We all have fun.
We have a good time. But I really look forward to weaving events because of this sharing of culture. It's fun when I get to be a student as well. Sometimes we don't teach, and we get to just, take other classes, learn new techniques. We're always teasing my mom because she'll try like 5 different projects and finish none of them, but she's like really excited to be able to start in on these new projects. It's one of the ladies before was, I didn't catch her name, she was saying how it can be addicting, and I agree that when I was younger I didn't really I'd be like, oh man, like I have to go to all these things, and
Yeah, we didn't have a choice.
and we didn't really
about
have
it.
a choice, so but I'm grateful for it now. It's very addicting. It's fun, and when I get new weavers, I always tell them about how, when I was first starting, like I've been weaving for a really long time, because sometimes they feel bad about like, oh, my row isn't as perfect as yours, and I'm like, I've been weaving a really long time, and I remember my first row, and seeing how it was kind of sloppy, and my grandma would do a row over it, and I'd just be like, why can't I weave like that? And it's kind of nice to think about how like I'm really getting there now. I can do really nice work, and it's because I've kept at it. It's because I've again, we didn't really have a choice for a while, but I'm grateful for it now. It's paid off that I am now seeing how skilled you can get as you keep up with it, and have that want to learn, that need to learn new things.
And I love that teaching moment when you're, I believe that our people traditionally, culturally, think in patterns. So it's just remembering, waking up your spirit and your blood to remembering that pattern. So it's a lot of counting in patterns, but people get intimidated by it. And so I love that moment when a new weaver is learning some stitch. And so they'll say like, the X stitch is too hard. I don't even want to try. And it's like, well, you had to try 4 stitches at least. I'll help you through those 4. You have to try at least some of it. And then they'll do it and they'll say, well, that wasn't that hard. Why didn't you tell me it was easy? And so it's just waking up that feeling in your fingers. And even if a student doesn't get the pattern, I think it's very important that they try and they just keep working at it and reminding themselves what these skills are. And so I think that my favorite part of basket weaving right now is teaching and just exposing other people and working with kids and people in recovery. I think that it's very soothing to have something to just focus on. Just getting through the next row is super important for people to have and learn.
Yeah, it's always nice to, because when you grow up, I always tell them I grew up, looking for the patterns. I'm always looking at the row below it so that I'm making sure that my pattern is on, and I know I've learned that not everyone sees these patterns like I do, so I have to try and show them. And yeah, not everyone can do it when they're first starting out, but I just have to get creative and find a different way for them to keep on. So yeah, again, I'm like learning
We're not mean
different
We're
learning
trying.
different ways to teach based on the way somebody learns has been something that I've been really working on and trying to accommodate for them. And we get told a lot that we're really good teachers, and I'm always like, I don't know. I'm not sure what you mean by that, because I always feel like we're just joking around. But it's always nice to hear that people appreciate what we do.
He na au mā kua i ka pō, he na au mā kua i ke au, na au mā kua kumulani, na au mā kua kumuhonu, na au mā kua kumukupuna, o kini ka lau, o mano ka lehu, na au mā kua i ka hiki nā komohana, na au mā kua i ka ākau hema, na au mā kua i luna, lalo, na au mā kua i ke kai ka wai, na au mā kua ke kua hiwi ke awa, na au mā kua i nā wahi a pau, ia ku, ia hina, na au mā kua ho o kumu, ho o malu, ho o ulu, ho o lakino, ho o lau pai, e ho o lohe mai ku leo, e haawi i ka mana loa, no ke ola o ka mākou pula pula, e ola no e a mama wano Aloha nau kākou. My name is Marcus Hanalei Marzan. I'm from the island of Oahu, born and raised in Kaneohe in Hawaii. I am a fiber cultural practitioner, different forms. I first started to weave and get interested in the fiber arts when I was a little boy. My great-grandmother was was the last weaver in my family, and she made beautiful hats and mats with lauhala, or the pandanus leaves. And I was always intrigued at them growing up, and looking at them, trying to figure out how to make them. And unfortunately, she passed away before I was born, so I didn't have anyone to actually share that knowledge with me in my family. And when I was in high school, there was a summer program that was being offered at the Bishop Museum in Honolulu, and I decided to take the class. And the teacher was a wonderful lady. Her name was Minerva Ka'awa, and she taught me all the basic materials and projects, from how to clean and prepare the material, the leaves of the pandanus tree, how to strip them and make the different projects, starting off with the simple projects like a bracelet, a fan, and a small mat, progressing to a basket and more intricate double weave baskets. And that really sparked my interest in continuing that practice. And when I went to the University of Hawaii at Manoa, I met another wonderful teacher of mine, Maile Andrade, who also started to share other forms of materials with me. So the twining and the netting and the cordage making, and then advanced levels of ulana, or our weaving with lauhala. So she was the first teacher to introduce me to weaving fine papale, or our hats. And through that interaction and with my teacher, Maile, she brought me to the first gathering here at the Longhouse in Evergreen in 2001. And ever since, we've been working together, traveling together in various capacities around the Pacific, in various Indigenous weaving gatherings, Indigenous visual arts gatherings. And fortunately, during my time at the university, I was able to learn a lot from her. And while I was there, I was introduced to a textile conservation class, which brought me, gave me the opportunity to work at the Bishop Museum, and with our collections there, our cultural materials. And with that experience, I was able to gain a lot more insight into my traditional practices, weaving practices of Hawaii, And after a while, a position opened at the museum, and I applied and I got the position. So I was very fortunate that my introduction into weaving from the university class through Miley Andrade brought me to where I am today. I serve as a culture advisor for Bishop Museum. I've been there for 15 years, and it's really a pleasure to really share the knowledge that I have and the opportunity that I have to bring other community people, researchers, family members into the museum and share the collections with them, inspire them, reconnect them with the family treasures that they have in the collection. So I think that's really an important thing, the cultural connection that we have with our kupuna. Kupuna is our Hawaiian word for ancestor. So we have the living kupuna, our elders, but to me, our kupuna are also the things that our kupuna made. So the things that I care for at the Bishop Museum, along with the collection staff, are voices of our kupuna that are in physical form. And through those physical kupuna, we were able to have a dialogue and understand and learn some of the knowledge that was retained in those vessels, so that we can reinterpret and bring those things back to life today. Many of those techniques and practices no longer have living people that can teach that, or that don't have a continuous line of unbroken teaching passing down from one generation to generation. So there are several people in Hawaii in the different disciplines who have taken upon themselves to really try and reinvigorate and reawaken those practices in the community. And I'm fortunate enough to have been able to work with many of them. And because of my passion in fiber and all of those techniques that Miley shared with me at the university, I've been able to create some of the more obscure weaving traditions that haven't been seen in Hawaii for well over 100 years, some of them. One of the examples of the cord work is something like this. This is traditionally it's called a koko pu'upu'u. Koko pu'upu'u were usually used as carrying nets for the chiefly class to carry gourds and wooden calabashes, storing food or their personal possessions when they traveled from place to place. And this cord work would be a buffer and protected those vessels in transit when they would travel across the island or to different islands on the canoes. But there are various techniques and designs that haven't been seen in living culture, and there's a small handful of us today that are trying to bring that particular practice back. And that's always been my passion, to try and reawaken some of those old practices and those sleeping traditions that haven't been seen in our community for generations, and bring those things back so that they have a relevance to today and the culture of today. Even though some of those practices and traditions were meant for specific intentions in the past, I think they also have importance for the community today, even though the relevance is not the same technically, but the intention is the same. For instance, these carrying vessels, the net carriers, the koko pu'upu'u, again, like I mentioned, were used to carry food and possessions from place to place of the chiefly families in class. But because we don't necessarily have that same structure today, these would not necessarily be used in the same fashion as it was with our ancestors. But we use them today to acknowledge all of the knowledge and history that we've been given to care for, and have that knowledge cared for and passed down in a very respectful way. So that's one of my goals, is to try and bring back a lot of these early techniques or older techniques and make them relevant in today's context. And water is a very important thing, just like my water bottle that I have right here. In Hawaii, we have two forms of water. We have the salt water from the sea and the fresh water from our springs and the rain. And both in Hawaiian understanding and belief are the elemental manifestations of two deities, Kane and Kanaloa. Kane is the god of fresh water and life, and Kanaloa is the god of salt water and purification. So the two are brothers in our stories, and they would travel from place to place. Kane would go and stick his digging stick into the earth to bring up new springs, to bring life to the land, and Kanaloa would follow. And because Kanaloa was the god of the sea and cleansing, it was a perfect duality between the two of them. And I think that's the most important thing to remember in so many of our practices that we care for. There's always a responsibility and privilege that comes with those things that are passed to us. Much like the duality between Kane and Kanaloa, fresh water and salt water, there's always the things that you have to do to care for your family, and then the things that come to you because of that care for the family. And to always trying to maintain that balance between those responsibilities and privileges is not very easy, definitely, but we should always strive for that. There's a lot of traditional stories and dances and songs that honor that and recognize those practices. And I actually want to end by offering a chant of recognizing the connection between two people and recognizing the thing that was offered and how it will be cared for, and maintaining the relationship that is built. In this chant, it actually recognizes water and our carrying sticks, our burden sticks. And when you place something on our burden sticks, you have to have a counterbalance so that you could travel with it properly. So in this chant, the gift that is offered to you is metaphorically placed on the burden stick, and to maintain the balance, you have to recognize the weight and the responsibility of that by placing your commitment to care for it on the other end, so that it remains balanced in both yourself as well as the connection that you make with the person or the community that you're working with. So I'd like to offer this chant to all of you. I kulani ha ko I ka olu e kau mai ka awa mo ke kule ana ha awe velehia ka umeke heke ie ka ua koko le hua ka puu I loko nei a ki ke pamo I kua hia ka ipu pawe ai a ilu na piha no ke opu halau ka hue wai e kau lei ka awa mo e hapai kau pono e alo a he alo I ke aloha. Aloha.
My name's Lisa Telford. I'm a Haida basket weaver. I'm happy to be here at the Tears of, I can't remember, what do you call it? Tears of Duk'Wibahl? Duk'Wibahl. And participate. It's a good to reconnect with all the people that I met in 2001 and the people I met in Hawaii, and help each other share information, because weaving is a strong connection for me. It's every indigenous culture practices weaving. It's part of survival, but now it's created still just for the beauty. I've woven since 1992. I enjoy weaving. I call it my thread to sanity because it keeps me grounded and happy. Thank you for allowing me to participate.
I'm Carol Emarthley Douglas. I'm Northern Arapaho and Seminole, originally from Oklahoma, and I've been a weaver for 18 years. I do coiled baskets, and I use contemporary materials. It's a traditional coiling technique, but I use hemp core and wax linen thread. And I learned basket weaving from the basketry school in Seattle. And I didn't grow up in a very traditional household. My parents both went to boarding school, so of course my father was not encouraged to learn any of his culture. And my mother was raised in St. Stephen's Mission school in Wyoming, so she was also not encouraged to learn any of her culture. So my parents raised us without a lot of real information about our culture. My dad did speak his language. He's a full-blood Seminole from Oklahoma, so I did have that part of my culture and learned from them some of the language, very little. My mother just really didn't have any information for us as far as her family or, a lot of stories from her family. So since I started basket weaving, I think maybe the past 20 years I've been kind of catching up. So I'm learning from both of my both families, from my Northern Arapaho tribe and then from the Seminole tribe. So, and in my baskets, it's contemporary because I'm inspired by the Northern Arapaho tribe and some of the ledger art that they have, the colors, some of the beadwork, and that's what I put into my baskets. And also from the Seminole tribe, I've done baskets with that were inspired by some of the patchwork. So, like I said, so I feel like I'm just catching up on learning about both my cultures. So I've been weaving, like I said, for 18 years, and I do 2 markets. I do the Santa Fe Indian Market every year that I'm accepted, and also the Heard Museum Show. Coiling is very time-consuming, so I will have that 6-month period between the 2 shows to come up with maybe a couple of, hopefully like 5 pieces of work. So I learned that particular type of coiling from basketry school in Seattle. Actually, it was in Ballard, and I took a class from Marilyn Moore. So, like I said, I wasn't, I didn't grow up with a lot of my culture, so I kind of went to look for it, and it just happened to took a couple of classes from the basketry school, and it was non-native, but they were carrying on that basket weaving. So I took a couple classes there. I started doing twining with cedar bark, and I really enjoyed that. But I saw a sample of a coil basket that Marilyn Moore had, and I just liked the shape of it and the colors she used, and just was really interested in learning that. So once I took that class, that's where I got my start with the coiling, and that's what I've been doing ever since. So like I said, I do my designs from my 2 cultures, and I do coiling miniatures also, and I kind of came up with a little a concept of my own. I do round reed as a material, base material, and I use raffia for some of my miniatures, and I thin down the materials so the raffia will fit into the beading needles, and then that I'll coil my small miniature baskets. And they also are, I also am inspired by ledger art, so that's what I've been doing with those. And I'll use sometimes some thread or some silk thread for the small pieces I do. I've been inspired by just this, living in this area in the Northwest, seeing all the weavers and then going to the gatherings. And every time I go to a gathering, I learn from everybody else. So every year I go, there's always something else to learn or, just to get different ideas. So I really appreciate the environment here. So.
Loa Ryan, Bilham Nech, Dewayu, Metlakatla, British Columbia, Canada, Dewawatku, Bremerton, Washington, Dewayu. My name is Loa Bilham Nech Ryan. I'm Simshan from northern British Columbia. I was born in a tiny little village across from Prince Rupert Harbor called Metlakatla. And there was like about 300 people when I was growing up. We had no running water, we had no electricity, and I guess apparently a lot of people in my generation lived that way. I didn't realize it till I expanded my horizons and we moved away from the village. Back in the 50s, my dad took us to Vancouver, British Columbia for a better education. And I went to high school in Kitsilano in Vancouver, British Columbia. My entire family moved from Prince Rupert on my father and brother's twin fishing boats that were about 40 feet in length. And on the way down, we divided the family up between the two boats. There were 8 of us on board. And we fished. My father had to do his fishing because we were during the fishing season. He had to set up his nets at 5 or 4 or 5 in the morning, very early. So we had experienced his type of living, not knowing when we were growing up, we were busy playing on the beaches, swinging in the trees in the woods, and just not really aware of what was going on until we got older. My mother introduced us to the washing machine, which she had one of those wringer washers, one that had a motor that sounded like a lawnmower, and it scared me to death when I had to help her. And then when my father brought in the first fish of the season, my mother would take us down to the beach and we'd have to help her gut the fish. And she didn't take the heads off. She used every bit of the fish. And our diet was mainly fish, any seafood that they could gather, clams. We didn't have oysters. We had ullikins, which is a staple in our tribe. Excuse me. We use it for, they render the grease down. There's like 3 different patterns for the fish that the fishermen go out. They know exactly when, and they could use the moon to guide them to go out and catch the first catch. And the first catch, and I probably will say it wrong, so I will not. All I know is that they get render grease from the ullikin, which is used like butter on our food and on our seaweed, on our fish. Just like you use butter on a lot of food, we use ullikin grease. And moving down to Vancouver, my parents went back up north to Prince Rupert in the springtime. And I didn't want to move again, so I stayed in Vancouver, went to business college after high school, and learned enough in business college where I could teach the classes. And then once I had enough information, I could go on and work as a stenographer at the Canadian Pacific Railroad. From then on, I became a young teenage woman single and free, and met my husband, who was from the U.S. And so from 1959, when I got married, until now, I've been a resident of the United States, and had 2 children. He was in the Navy, so we traveled around. And during this time, I was busy with just being a mother. And then I went to school in night school when I went to work when my kids were old enough I could leave them alone when they came home from school. But I worked at a school. And I was able to be off the same time they were, off summertime. And during this time, I was a campfire leader. I was a Navy wife. I had my job, and then raising the children. And once the children were old enough in high school, I went to work full-time. And then I took college at night, 2 nights a week, until I received my degree. And then, after my degree, I was interviewing for an accountant position at a school district. And during that time, I'm looking at the buildings during the interviews thinking, I don't like this building. The windows don't open. There's no fresh air. And at the same time that I'm having this dilemma, the Sklallam tribe advertised in the newspaper that they were holding classes in carving, bent box carving, mask making, tool making, drum making, and then weaving. I took up weaving with Ed Carrier from the Suquamish tribe. He taught me how to gather. We worked on this one particular basket where it turned out that I was the only student left of the entire class. And I believe there was one more person with me, and I can't remember who she was. I apologize if she's listening, because she was from Washington tribe. So it was from that point on when I learned to gather the cedar and strip it, and I felt a draw. I felt that I couldn't leave it alone. The desire to continue. I took the bark home, put a plywood on my pool table, started stripping with a knife, followed that line. Cedar bark is so straight that it just made a perfect seam. So I called my mother the next day and I said, was anyone a weaver in our family? And she said, your grandmother was, and I helped her. And your other grandmother was a weaver, and then the great-grandmothers were weavers. And I said, was Grandma Lucy a weaver? And she said, yes. And I said, I didn't see her weaving. She said, no, she had to hide it. And she told me the story that when they were living in the village as she was growing up, if their parents were weaving or carving, they were thrown into jail. If they were speaking the language, they were thrown into jail, or the children were strapped. My brothers spoke English, or Somaliach, which is our language. They spoke it fluently until they went to school. The teacher strapped them for speaking it, so they had to stop. So we didn't have our culture. Our culture was, we were brought into this world to believe we were part of the English society. We had piano teachers in the village. We had missionaries come into the village. And so our culture was almost gone. When I took up the weaving and asked my mother why we didn't see them weaving, and she told me this story, I decided to pursue it. I went to look for someone to teach me the Tsimshian weaving, and there was no one in Washington State. So I just went from the Northwest Basket Weaving Guild, which is non-native, and just learned from all of the weavers there. It was kind of a conference like we're at now, where the weavers were sharing with weavers, and you learned how to weave something. So after that, I went on to learn from whomever I could. Ed Carrier, Elaine Emerson from up in eastern Washington, Colville tribe. I learned from non-tribal people. I learned the basics from everyone until I found out that Dolores taught up in Alaska. She was teaching me the basketry there, and once I finished with her, we did a 6-month apprenticeship. We went to visit some museums in Victoria and Seattle, and I felt still, when I finished with that I still did not see a Tsimshian basket that I could copy, that I could recreate, that my ancestors would have woven, because none of the museums around here had a big collection. So I took it upon myself to go to Quebec, and I spent a week there from 7 in the morning until 9 at night. I was studying my ancestors' baskets, took pictures, took notes, and it was almost as if the ancestors were saying, here we are, come and have at it. So I did, and it was the most rewarding experience, because at that time, the museums had gone to the villages in I think it was like the 1930s, when they realized that the weavers weren't weaving anymore. They were not weaving the gathering baskets, which are like 2 feet, 3 feet tall, this wide. I mean, those were huge baskets that I was looking at. So from then on, I took pictures, I took notes, looked at the stitching, looked at the patterns, and each basket had a description in our language of the baskets and what it was used for. And that was the most rewarding trip, and I felt I could go home now and weave a typical Tsimshian gathering basket. And today I have many, many pieces in museums throughout the world. I have 3 at the Smithsonian's NMAI, Willamette University in their museum, Alaska has them in their museum, everywhere. So I feel like I've contributed now to our culture, and I continue to teach, and I enjoy it. And thank you to the staff of Evergreen State College and the Longhouse for inviting me to this event, because it's so fulfilling to be amongst the weavers who have experienced the same thing that I have. And we can share more and learn more. Thank you. Now it's your turn.
I have a question for you. Have you woven in a big basket, those big gathering baskets?
I have, and that was my goal. And it is now...
Do you have any, are they in museums now?
It's at NMAI at the Smithsonian. It's a large gathering basket.
Do you have awards for your wonderful work?
I have many. I've taken a best of show. I've taken first place.
Why don't you share those right now?
Oh, I couldn't tell you how many I've had.
You must have some that are outstanding in your mind.
I have the first basket that was purchased by the NMAI was for the book that was put out that Lisa was part of, Lisa Telford. Mm-hmm. And I have a basket in there, and the second piece was a best of show at the Museum of Man in San Diego. And it's a collaboration with Jerry Lactonen. He did the mask, a Yupik mask with the feathers or arrows, or I can't remember what they were. And then I did the apron, and that took best of show at the Museum of Man in San Diego. That's at the Smithsonian's NMAI. And the dulk, the large gathering basket, was purchased last year by NMAI. And I have I have a stack of ribbons at home. My daughter says you should display these at the booths. I sell at Indian Market in Santa Fe. I've been doing that for almost 20 years. And it's a juried show, so you have to be selected every year. And I've many awards from them.
Did you do the market this year at Santa Fe?
Yes. I was there just 2 days before I came here and traveled from the market, and it was a very successful market.
Excellent.
Now it's your turn.
Thank you for sharing that with me. I was sure that you were not giving yourself credit for, and I wanted you to.
Oh, thank you.
I've admired you from afar for a long time, your work.
Thank you.
Yeah. My name is Marilee Peterson, and I am from the Eastern Band of the Cherokee. I was born in East Tennessee, in a little shanty that was maybe 10 miles from the ancient city of Echota. And I had an interesting childhood with my Cherokee grandmother, who had married my grandfather. He needed a wife. He had a 6-year-old child. His first wife had expired during childbirth. And she was a beautiful and wonderful woman and embraced the little girl as her own. And then they had 5 children. But that's neither here nor there. I want to talk about how I came to weaving and to the Northwest after being born in East Tennessee. I was in a little country school, and this was near the end of World War II. I was 12, and I came up on a beautiful book like the one that you're in, and similar. And it was, it was about this thick and this big. It was a huge, big book. And it was all about basketry, Indian basketry from all the different tribes. And it was not a Curtis book that was all about people. This was about beautiful basketry, period. And I was turning the pages and going, oh, and just getting so excited each time I would see them, and not knowing that my ancestors had made split oak baskets. I found that out much later. But I came to the Skokomish tribe, and they had many pages of wonderful basketry, and it just rocked my world. And I'm saying, Skokomish, what a magical name that is. It sounds like poetry. It sounds like a song. Skokomish. And I was writing it. You know how kids will scribble. I was writing it for a long time after that. And just after the Second World War, my parents migrated to Southern California. And my mother was always big on education of all kinds. But she was part Cherokee, but denied it, of course, But anyway, she took me to the Los Angeles County Museum because she was interested in an exhibition that was going on that was religious icons. Well, there were 2 different exhibitions going on. The icons over here, and over here was this fabulous native exhibit, Northwest native exhibit. And there were chilkat robes, there were carvings, bentwood boxes, and I was just so touched by that. And my mother didn't even want me to, why are you interested in that? And I'm thinking, oh, well. And I remember that there was like a hallway between the two exhibits, and I was standing in the hall looking first one way and then the other. And I knew from somewhere, right then and there, I had to make a choice. What's your preference? Which do you like best? Well, there was no question about it. I just walked right in there and
Yay.
and loved and felt embraced and loved by the wonderful pieces that were in the exhibit from.
They're powerful, aren't they?
Yes, yes. Well, and I absolutely could not believe the chilkat weavings. I was so drawn to the chilkat weavings. And I always have been from that day forward. And I was about 14 at that time. And of course, time passed, and I was, I have to tell you how I met my Skokomish husband. I now live at Skokomish. Mm-hmm. And I know that in that little country school, I created that for myself at that moment. But I didn't know it until about 10 years ago.
Wow.
It dawned on me. You created that, says I to myself. And my husband, incidentally, is a master carver. And we work together. I do his marketing and that kind of thing for him. So back to weaving. I was always researching, and I knew that there was no way in the world that I could ever wrap my head around chilkat weaving, and I still could not. But I came upon raven's tail weaving, and I said, I could do that. It's pretty straightforward. I think I could do that. So I found that Cheryl Samuels is a master who was doing classes. And she had a class planned here at the college, but not in time for me. I was going to learn anyway, so I ordered a kit from her. I ordered several kits from her. Well, she sent everything. She sent me all the weft and manual, her book, and her tapes and all of that stuff. But I had to wait for the warp. Uh-oh. Because, well, you know how it is in weaving. Something doesn't, they don't have there's ceremonies, or somebody breaks an arm and they can't do the thigh spinning or something.
They're all hand spun.
So I didn't have the warp. Mm-hmm. And they were having the first gathering of artists of the Pacific Rim 15 years ago. And my husband was participating, and I said, I want to go too. And he had made me a loom. I took my loom and my weft. Somebody had said to me, you'll probably run into some weavers there and you will come up with the warp. Just go. So, okay, I'm sitting there in the weaving studio with Yvonne and all of these wonderful people, and here comes Evelyn Vanderhoop weaving a chilkat robe. I was in heaven just to be in her presence, and so humbled that I could hardly speak. So she said, she asked me, "What are you doing?" And I told her my story, and she said, "Well, I happen to have some chilkat warp, if you don't mind using it. I will share with you. I will sell you some." And I said, I'll take it. And Susan Pavel, who is a Salish weaver who lives at Skokomish as well, her husband is Skokomish, was weaving. And between the two of them, they got me through this lumpy little piece.
Yay. It shouldn't have been lumpy. The chilkat warp is so much finer than the raven's tail because it has this one little tiny strip of yellow cedar in it.
It feels different, yeah, yeah. But so my first weaving was 15 years ago.
Wow.
And that's how it happened. And I have made many, many small raven's tail pieces, and since then I have had 3 sessions with Cheryl. And
did you go to Alberta?
And I try her patience every time. She'll say, do you know Cheryl?
I've taken classes with her when she was living in Alberta.
You know, and you were in the first class that I did with her here, now that I think about it.
Yes, I was.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you remember how she would come to me and say, "What are you doing?" I don't know. So anyway, then she would get me straightened out and off I would go. So I'm still kind of making a lot of mistakes and taking out a lot of weaving and starting over and that kind of thing. But I love it. And I feel now confident enough, Loa, that I want to do a big piece. But I don't want to do a robe. Now that would be a huge commitment. And I was talking to Evelyn yesterday, and I said, "Well, you know, now I'm making this little bag, and I'm having all these problems here. I can't. It's not. I can't talk and weave at the same time like she can. Mm-hmm. It's not walking and chewing gum to me. No, but anyway." I said, I think a robe would be too ambitious for me, but I've had a dream. I would like to weave myself a coat. And she said, "Oh, you should." And I said, "It's pretty ambitious." And she said, "Well, how about just a vest?" And I said, "Oh, yes, and then I could add the sleeves if I wanted to, one at a time." And we laughed, and I could make something interesting in the back, and So I think I'm feeling quite committed to that, and it feels good.
That seems to be more ambitious than the robe.
Does it really?
Yeah, to me it does.
Well, I think you would do it in panels, right?
Okay.
Like 2 panels and 1 panel, and you would see some accomplishment and some fruition with each. If you made 2 front panels,
yeah,
in a pinch you could sew them together and have a shawl. but that feels more attainable to me.
Okay. When you're ready for chilkat, we can do it together. My son wants one when he does a 4th feast. He will have earned a chilkat robe.
Oh, yes. Your son is powerful.
Yes. This October, he'll have his 4th feast. except he's sharing with.
He's a
the-
mover shaker in Tsimshian
He is.
country.
Definitely. Between my son, my daughter, and myself, we all have something going on, and it's just like we're just bringing this Tsimshian culture to a whole.
I love it. I love it.
Yes. My daughter has a doctorate in science, and she works
That's
with
exciting.
the fisheries. Yes.
Where does she work?
At UBC in Vancouver, BC. So she's busy with the culture.
I
in
love
that
their
respect.
museum. I could take my sleeping bag and hide out there.
It's nice. I've done research there too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, aloha, kakahiaka, whatever time of day it is. My name is Sabra Kauka, S-A-B-R-A-K-A-U-K-A. I'm from the island of Kauai in the Hawaiian Islands. I'm very honored to be invited here to the Longhouse to share a little bit about the Hawaiian arts that I do. And one of them is kapa. Kapa means to beat. And I am so thrilled to find some beautiful tools already here at the Longhouse that were made by Kala Willis of Hawaii Island. This is an ie kuku. It's a four-sided beater, and it has watermarks on it, which are beautifully carved into this wood. And this is a Hawaiian hardwood. At first, I thought Kala may have made these here, but I understand that that he made them at home and then brought them here and gifted them to the Longhouse. It's a wonderful gift. Had I known the quality of these tools that were here already, I wouldn't have had to bring any of my own. Do you have any questions for me?
You said this is a really hard wood.
Yes.
What kind of wood is it?
My guess is it's kawila. It's extremely heavy. This grain is beautiful, solid throughout. Kawila is a hardwood from Hawaii. It's on the rare side, but on the island of Hawaii, on the Big Island, they have some of the biggest and most beautiful trees. They have I wouldn't say they have an abundance of it, but the weight of this tells me that this is a very dense hardwood, kawila.
So, Auntie, the colors of these different pieces are different. So I'm taking it, each piece is from a different tree.
Oh yeah, this is a different tree, and it's this might be Ohialehua. I'm not sure, but it feels, it's a different feel. That's an unusual shape for us to use as a beater, but it would work. This is the more traditional shape, the round one. This is the beater we call hohoa. Hohoa is the first beater that we use. When we get the fibers, and we grow them for at least 2 years, me 2.5, 3 years, they've reached the height and the width that I want them to be. And throughout those years, I pluck the side branches so that the only leaves that are left are right at the top. So that it goes long, tall, straight without any holes. So we'll cut as many of those as we need to pound out into a sheet. I brought some samples up here to share with everyone and to show them. And I'm looking forward to teaching you how to make at least a little piece to work with.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yay.
I'm curious to know, is there a significance here, or is this the author's signature?
This is his, it looks, yeah, that's his signature. That's his signature, and it's so beautifully done. A little bit different design here. And I don't see a signature on that one.
No.
I'm not sure if that one's from him, but that's different. Anyway, this is just beautiful, the way he puts this in here. Beautiful. This is beautifully made. It's rare. I don't have any hohoa that actually have some beautiful carvings on the handle. That's another, yeah, it's flair. That's beautiful flair.
Is there a purpose for this, for the carvings on the handle?
It's just decoration. It's beautiful decoration. Yeah, beautiful.
What are these pieces called and used for?
These are called ohe kapala. Ohe meaning bamboo. Kapala is to stamp. So these are copper stamps, and we ink these with the ash from the kukui tree, the kukui nut. We burn it, and then we collect the soot, and then we take the nut and crush it up, put it in a glass jar in the sun till the oil rises up out of it, and we mix that in with the ash until we make a dye. And that's what we use to place on here and then print on our kapa.
Wow. I've never heard of that use with kukui. My mama taught me about kukui. We used it to eat.
Oh, yes.
Inamona.
Yes, inamona's delicious, just a little bit at a time.
And old time, many, many moons, the kukui nut was used for light.
Yes, absolutely, that's what it means. Kukui is a candlelight, torchlight.
So this is wonderful. Now, I see a difference in the coloration of some
Yes.
of them. These are darker, darker pieces, so it looks like it's used more?
Oh, yes, they are very well used. I have a piece in the show upstairs. Well, actually what happened was I cut the kapa down to fit the size of the show, and this is a piece that was cut off from it. Okay. The red is from the alai, which is the red earth, the red dirt from Kauai.
From Kauai.
And the black is the ash, the soot. And I'm really looking forward to learning from the weavers, the practitioners here, how they make their natural dyes. I work with a wonderful hui, or a wonderful group of people who are focused on reviving the use of the old dyes, and trying our very best to make them as permanent as we can, because natural dyes tend to be a little fugitive. They shift on you. But we found with the earth dyes that they stay, they're there. They're not going to shift. And we have all colors from blue, purple, brown, red, all the way through.
So how do you get those different colors? Because
It's the different places where they are found naturally. They're geologic deposits.
This is fascinating, because you remember some years ago back in Hawaii, somebody was producing those red t-shirts, red dirt shirts.
Can I tell you the story on that? 20 plus years ago, when I first started teaching Hawaiian studies in the schools, my students needed Mayday costumes, and we didn't have any money to buy any for them. And so we had, in Koloa School, in the southern part of Kauai, there's many hotels there. And a relative worked in a hotel. So every once in a while, the hotels have to recycle their linen, their sheets. And so I put out the word, got a huge donation of sheets, collected the red earth, got a great big barrel, filled it up with a little bit with water, put in the dirt, found the most rascal kid in the class to jump in there and with his feet stomp it down.
Pound it.
I had volunteers line up, and when I put the most rascal kid in there to do it, and he had a blast. And then we put the sheets in, and we wrung them out, and then we hung them on the chain link fence in front of the school to dry, and they got a nice pattern on them with that chain link.
Oh, yeah.
And this guy drove by who had a t-shirt company, and he saw the sheets drying on the fence, and by Christmas, that was May Day, so May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, he had a line of red dirt t-shirts that have taken off for all these years, and I wish my kids had a penny for every t-shirt he sold, because then I could buy costumes for them.
Okay, you know something though? We had one of those shirts, and the color did not stay. No. That's why when I see this here, to me, it's
well, that's because you
beautiful.
wash it.
Well, you have to wash it, right?
Yeah, and I don't, once this goes on the kapa, no, I don't wash it. Yeah.
That's why this color is brilliant, and that's why when you mentioned the red dirt, I know about the red dirt. I never was there, but I know of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So there's a story on kapa. I started getting into kapa about 20-something years ago because I had returned home. I was taking hula, and I wanted to make my kihe, my cape for hula, for chanting and all that. So I started to do that. And a friend of mine, Cheryl Lovell Obotaki, who has since passed, is walking with a kupuna, was on the burial council for Kauai. And she heard we were doing this, and she said, Sabra, can you make kapa for the reinterment of the kupuna iwi, the ancestral remains that were being returned as a result of some tremendous work that was done by Halealoha Ayau, Antipua, Kanakaole Kanahele, and all these awesome people who were on a burial council advising Congress, advising the feds. Halealoha wrote the language for NAGPRA, Native American Graves Repatriation and Protection Act.
Right.
And it was that act that required any university or museum that was holding ancestral remains from all people to return those to their place of origin. So on Kauai alone, we started to get dozens, if not hundreds, back. And so this prompted the need for a whole little army of people to begin to grow this plant again, cultivate it, make the tools, and to pound the kapa. And so that's how we started.
This is just wonderful,
But
beautiful.
I credit them. And then I got a grant from Office of Hawaiian Affairs to bring over a kumu, a teacher from Oahu who was several years ahead of us, Kawai Aono Oyoka, and I thank her to this day for coming to teach us over a period of a year. She came 4 times for 4 days each. We made our tools, we put the plants in the ground, we made our dyes, and that began our journey.
It's just amazing to me.
Yeah.
Just one last question.
Yeah.
This one is different.
This one is
have that-
different only because I haven't, it was part of the one that I cut, and I haven't dyed it yet. I'll probably work on it a little bit here. These dyes, this is ma'o. Ma'o is Hawaiian hibiscus. It's a yellow flower, but it makes a green dye. This one is...
Is that from the flower itself or the leaves?
Actually the flower. And this one is from Olena, which is turmeric, ginger. It's a ginger. Sometimes I get it yellow, sometimes I get it orange, depending what I add as a mordant. But I'm looking forward to your making some of these pieces, small pieces. I brought enough for you to work with and for other people as well.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Ania Nishna, Kelly Church in Dishnakaz, Hopkins, Michigan, Nedojabo. I'm a black ash basket weaver. I'm a Anishinaabe from Michigan, and I belong to the Mechi Beneshiwish Band and Grand Traverse Band Descent. My family's been working with baskets for centuries. We have a photo from 1919 of my family weaving baskets, and with that photo we can document back 6 years, but my grandmother said we made baskets before they made cameras. So we've been making them for a really, really long time. Black ash is a tree that grows in the swamps, and we harvest the tree and we pound on it with the backside of an axe, and it releases all of the growth rings from the tree. This is one of the growth rings that we use. And when I take this growth ring and I split it in half, I put it inside this splitter and I score it, and it peels down just kind of like a banana, and on the inside is the beautiful basket weaving materials. And this is what the material looks like after we split it down. Really smooth and beautiful. Our baskets have been made for centuries for many utilitarian purposes, such as baby cradles, fishing creels, and all kinds of utilitarian gathering baskets. And this is something that we still do today, but in today's world, we do the same thing we used to. We use our baskets for our living ways, and we also use our baskets to take care of our people. And so today I use the baskets in my home all over for different things like my bread, makeup, anything, CDs, things that we have today. But I also use my baskets to sell them to pay for my home and things like that. I learned how to weave baskets from my cousin John Pigeon and my father Bill Church. And without these two, I would not be doing what I do today. They both took their time and they answered every question I had. They worked with me for years to get me knowledgeable to everything that I know today. The emerald ash borer was introduced into Michigan in 1992. It's an invasive species that has been killing all of the black ash trees in the United States. And the USDA predicts we will lose the entire ash resource of North America due to this bug.
And in Michigan already, the whole mitten is decimated of ash trees, so we've already lost over 500 million trees. In light of this, my artwork has become activism work as well, where I produce work that looks beautiful, and it'll be green like the bug, have some copper woven into it. The bug has a copper belly, and it's to draw the viewer in, and then you'll see a bug in a vial, and it's to get people to question about it. Why is that bug with that basket? And to get people aware of the situation that we're going through. The bug is now in 23 states and 2 provinces, so it's affecting the whole United States. And so in light of this, we have been collecting seeds to save for the future generations. The seeds are viable for up to 30 years, and I hope that the future generations will replant these so we can keep the tradition going as long as we have already. I've also been working with a lot of youth and documentation. So where we used to go into the woods and, bring our kids into the woods and show them everything firsthand and come home and tell them our stories and share our oral traditions. Now I document everything on film and just every step that there is to doing our work, and also working with a lot of youth, because it's the youth of today that in 20 to 30 years will be making sure that we bring the tradition back should we lose every single tree in the future. Black ash basketry is an important part of all the peoples of the Northeast. And something we're doing here while we're here is we're building, this is the base to a basket that we're building up in our weaving group together. So I'm building the base of the basket out of the black ash, and then each weaver will add their material row by row to build it up, and it will become the community basket for the longhouse that we'll leave behind here once we're gone. Black ash traditions are something that has been integral to our communities. It helps us, we work together. It teaches you patience. It teaches you to be good together, to help each other. And we have words associated with it, like Kukabininigan, which means basket, or Isagak, which is black ash. And these words, without our materials in our baskets, we will have not, the use for them won't be there anymore. So we are trying to save this tradition. It's not lost yet, but we are in danger of losing it. And we have not skipped a generation of harvesters in centuries, and we're hoping that we don't have to skip a generation of harvesters in the future. So I'm a black ash basket weaver and from Michigan, and I'm really happy to be here at the Longhouse to share these traditions with other people, but to also learn theirs as well, because all basket weaving traditions are important, and not many people realize how few basket weavers and knowledge holders that there are. So thank you for having me, miigwech, and I'm pleased to be here, and I'm honored, and miigwech.
Hi, my name is Henrietta Boyd, and I'm Chehalis from Washington State. My mother was Hazel Pete, and she always had us working. Just as little kids, we were doing beadwork, making chokers, and that's how we earned our money. I lived in Florida for 25 years, so I was away from her, but every time she would come down to Florida, she would always have her material with her. And she'd always sit out by the pool and be doing her baskets. And we went to the Seminole Fair, and we were walking around the grounds, and she saw some pine needles. She said, "Oh, look at those pine needles." So we got down and started gathering pine needles for her. And that's how she started making pine needle baskets, beautiful pine needle baskets. And she just she just saw them laying on the ground and picked them up and wanted to make some baskets out of them. So then when my husband retired, we moved back to Washington, and so I got to work with her for a couple years before she passed. But so this here basket here is, the design is from Bruce Miller from Sobier. This is his two-step design. And every Wednesday, Yvonne and Trudy and me and, we'd go over to Sobier's and we would sit and work with him for the afternoon and just talk and laugh and work on baskets and have some dinner. So it was always a very nice Wednesday. But this is his design, and he gave us permission to show people how to make it now. So this is my grandson Mo, and he's going to introduce himself. But this is his basket. He just started working this yesterday, and so he's almost done with it. And so he'll just kind of introduce himself and say where he's from.
So, hi, my name is Maurice Kane Billy, and I was born in Florida. I'm from the Seminole tribe of Florida. And I lived down there for 10 years, I think. About 10 years, and then me and my family moved up here. And we just, Kai got me into helping family gather cedar, or like, I've just helped gather cedar. I went and helped them get sweetgrass. And she's been teaching me how to make baskets like this. This is gonna be the second one I've made when it's finished. And that's all I got.
So we would like to thank the Evergreen College for putting this on. It's been very inspirational and meeting new people, and so thank you.
Hello, my name is Janice Hicks Boldchild, and I am Nisqually Chehalis, enrolled Nisqually. And I am from the Hazel Pete family, and I started learning about when I was 6 or 7. My grandma Hazel Pete had taught me how to start making baskets and how to gather material. We would go down to the ocean and we would gather sweetgrass, and we would go into the woods and get cedar. And so that's how I started to learn how to make baskets. And then I quit doing baskets, and I kind of took the wrong path. I took the wrong path, and so I quit doing baskets for a while. And I struggled with drugs and alcohol, and then I struggled with depression for a really long time. I would say maybe 15, 20 years of my life. And then in 2010 is when I decided to change my life around. Something had happened, something bad had to happen for me to change my life around. My dad, Ben Hicks, he's Nisqually, he had passed away, and I had went to his service, and I saw all these people at his service, and at the time I counted the books, and there was about 600 people. I said, wow, I want to be like him. I want a lot of people at my service. So I decided to change my ways and my attitude. And so that's how I started to change my life, and I started to get into my culture again. I found who I was, and I started to get into baskets. And last year, 2016, was paddle to Nisqually, and I had an opportunity to make 50-seater hats. And at first I was like, wow, that's a big order. And I did it. And so I made the deadline, and I did it, and I fell in love with it. And I've always liked to do baskets, but like I said, I struggled with that dark past. And so in March, there was about 10 of us that had a coming out of Master Weavers, and so I was one of them. And then my brother BJ and my sister Betty, and along with some others. And so now I am here at the Indigenous Artist Conference, and I'm having a really good time. I really like to learn of the different materials that there are in different countries or states. And so I brought some of the pieces that I made. So I just finished this turtle rattle, and it's not dry, it's not done yet, so I can't shake it too much. And it's made out of deer buckskin, and I don't know what kind of turtle this is, but it's a turtle shell. And then the stick is made out of redwood, I believe, or the cherry wood or something. And then this isn't finished, but this is, it's not supposed to look like this. These are just the hands. And so the hand, I know it looks kind of funny right now, but the hands, these are the hands. And so this is going to be a sweetgrass doll. And so here's the face and the smile. And so then I'm getting ready to make the skirt. And I just want to say thank you for inviting me to this conference today. Thank you.